Dart.
So this is just normal factoring. What you do is any two factors of this number, a and b, will, so a times b will equal 1 because it's their factors, and then a plus b should equal 2, the coefficient of the middle term. From there, you come up with the factors, so which for 1, factors of 1 are 1, and that's it. So it would be a and b equal 1. So then 1 times 1 equals 1, and then 1 plus 1 equals 2. So your factors then are x plus 1 times x plus 1. And then you set it equal to 0 to solve, and then x plus 1 equals 0. You subtract 1, x equals -1.
By solving this using Xbox. So first what you're going to do is you're going to make an x, and then you're going to multiply the first term by the last term, so you'll get -14x squared, and then you're going to just take the middle term, -5x, and put it on the bottom. Then you're going to think of different factors you can have for 14, so you have 1 times 14, and then 2 times 7. And so you know that it's going to equal up to that, and since it's a negative, you have to have one of them to be negative, but then you also need them to add up to -5x. It's like the first concept we taught you. And so since -5 is bigger, it's going to be the 7 that's negative. And then you need it to be an x because they have to multiply to equal -14x squared, and then 2x. And then you're going to move over and do the box part of the x box. And then you're going to put your first term in the upper left-hand corner, and then your last term in the lower right-hand corner. And then you're going to put your factors into the other two boxes, but it doesn't really matter where you put them. And then what you're going to do is you're going to look at the first column, and you're going to see what factors they have in common, and you can see that the only thing they have really in common is an x. And then what you're going to do is you're going to look at the next column and see what they have in common, and they only have a 1 in common because you can't just have a 0. And then you're going to look at each row and what they have in common. And then you have your two sets, and so you'll write them as 2x minus 7 times x plus 1, and then you're going to set it equal to 0. So then you'll have 2x minus 7 equals 0. You'll add 7 to both sides. You'll have 2x equals 7, divide by 2, and you'll have x equals 7 halves. And you'll do the same thing with the x plus 1, and you'll have x equals -1.
So this is grouping, and what usually happens is that it's a 4-term equation, and you kind of divide it into 2 parts, and you factor each of these individually. And so for this one, you can factor out a 9x squared, leaving you with an x plus 4. And on this side, you can factor out a -4, leaving you with an x plus 4. The goal here is to get these two things in parentheses to be the same. That is one factor. Then your other factor is 9x squared minus 4, making your two factors 9x squared minus 4 and x plus 4. Then just like in the past ones, you solve them individually to be 9x squared minus 4 equals 0. So you add 4 to both sides, leaving you with 9x squared equals 4. And then you divide by 9 and square root both sides, leaving you with x equals plus or minus 2/3. And this side is simple, x plus 4 equals 0, minus 4, minus 4, x equals negative 4.
This time we're going to solve by using the quadratic formula. And the quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, and it's all over 2a. And then so the first term is going to be your a, plus b is going to be your second term, and then c is going to be your last term. And so when we put all of it into the equation, b is going to be the negative 6, so you have negative of the negative 6 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so negative 6 squared minus 4 times a, and the coefficient's just 1, times c, which is 8, and that's all going to be over 2a, which is just going to be 2 times 1, so 2. And so then you'll have 6 plus or minus the square root of 36 minus 32 over 2, and that's going to equal 6 plus or minus the square root of 4 all over 2, so 6 plus or minus 2 over 2. So then you're going to go to solve for your x's. You'll have 6 plus 2 over 2 equals
x,
and then 6 minus 2 over 2 equals
x,
so then you'll get 8 divided by 2, which equals 4, and then you'll get 4 divided by 2, which equals 2. And then so then your x equals 4 and your x equals 2. Go.
So first you're going to go to y equals, type in your equation, which is going to be x squared minus 6x plus 8. Then you're going to hit graph. From there, you're going to go to second calc, and then you're going to find the zeros, which are going to be your solutions. And then your left bound, you're just going to go on the left side of where your graph hits the x-axis, and then right bound to the right side of where your graph hits the x-axis, and it'll say guess, and just hit enter. And it'll give you your x value, which in this case is x equals 2. And then for the second one, you do the same thing. Second calc, 0, move to the left of it, and then to the right. Guess, and then click enter, and then it'll give you your second one, which is x equals 4.
This time we're going to solve it by completing the square. And so usually you want the first term to have just a 1 as the coefficient, and if it doesn't, you just have to factor that out. And so then what you're going to do is you're going to take the first two terms and you're going to write them like x squared minus 6x and put it into parentheses plus another term that we're going to find, and then you're going to do plus 8 and leave another space for another term we're going to find and equal that to 0. And so what you're going to do is you're going to then want to find this term, and how you find that term is you take the middle term, negative 6, and you'll multiply it by 1/2 to get negative 3. And then what you're going to do is you're going to square that to get positive 9. And then positive 9 is your new term. And so because you added a 9 to one side, what you'd have to do then is add a 9 to the other side, but we don't want to create another term because we want it to equal to 0. So then to get rid of the 9, we legally, I guess, have to put a negative 9. So then you're left with that. And then what you're going to do is you're going to factor it like normal. So you'll have x minus 3 times x minus 3. And then that will just equal x minus 3 squared. And then you can just add these two terms together, so you'll equal minus 1, and then you'll equal that to 0 again. And then you're just going to solve this like normal, so then you'll have x minus 3 squared equals 1, and then you'll square root it to get x minus 3 equals plus or minus 1 since we square rooted it. So then you'll have x minus 3 equals 1, and then x minus 3 equals negative 1. So then if we add a 3, you'll get x equals 4. And then if you add 3, you'll get x equals 2.
Alright, so first, this is polynomial long division, and first what you're going to want to do is just set it up like a normal division problem that you would do without any x's. And then what you do is you want to cancel out this first term. So what you do is you multiply this term to get that first number, the first term of your outside number, to match this so that when you subtract them, they'll cancel out. So here you would multiply it by 5x squared. So then that gives you a 5x cubed, but you also have to multiply the second term by what you multiplied the first term by, which leaves you with plus 10x squared. Then put that all in parentheses, and you subtract that, which cancels that out and leaves you with a negative 16x squared. Then you bring this term down, giving you a negative 28x. And you do the same process as you did with this first set of terms. So you would multiply that by negative 16x, leaving you with negative 16x squared and negative 32x. Put that all in parentheses, subtract again, that cancels out, and this leaves you with 4x. And then we're going to do the same thing and bring this negative 2 down. And then what you do is the same process one more time. So you are going to multiply by 4. So 4x plus 8. And then once again subtract that, which cancels this out and leaves you with a 10. This 10 is your remainder. And you add this on here by doing plus 10 over, or sorry, it's a negative 10, plus 10 over x plus 2. Be negative.
This time we're using synthetic division, and what we're dividing by is going to be the term x plus 3, but we're just going to take the plus 3. But when you divide, you're going to do the opposite of the sign it has, so you're going to divide by the negative 3. And then what you're dividing are the coefficients in front of the terms. So the first coefficient will be 1. And then notice how there's no x to the third degree. Well, you have to somehow account for it, so you're going to put the placeholder of 0. Then you have the coefficient in front of the x squared, and that will be negative 1. And then, again, there's no x to the first degree, but you need to account for it, so there's a 0 and then a 5. Okay, you're going to automatically bring down the first term, and so you'll have a 1, and then you multiply it by the negative 3 to get negative 3, and then you add the column, so you'll get negative 3. Then multiply negative 3 by negative 3, and you'll get positive 9. Add the column, and you'll get 8. 8 times negative 3 is 24. Negative. And then you'll add them, and you'll get negative 24. Multiply negative by negative, and you'll get a positive 72. Add them, and you'll get 77. 77 then is your remainder. Normally, if it works out perfectly, what you'll get is a 0 at the end. And then what you're going to do is these then can be turned into a whole formula or another equation itself. But what you'll do is go a degree down from this. So then this will be, that's an arrow, and x to the third minus 3x squared plus 8x minus 24 plus 77 over negative 3. And then that's your equation that is left.